Some years ago, when Nirmala and I lived in India, people would ask us occasionally after some class, some gathering of some sort, when people were just milling around informally, or sometimes informal question answer sessions, people would ask us, "So do you have any children?" Married couple, it's kind of an assumption, and it's not. This is not unique to India. I'm just happened to be thinking about it because it came up often enough in India. We lived there for quite a while, almost 9 years. Anyway, and we don't have children of our own, so we would answer that way initially. But then later on, we started saying, people would ask, "How many children do you have?" And we would say thousands. And, there was sort of this stunned silence for a moment, and then we would smile, and then they would smile, and then, the assumption was we related to everyone as someone to serve, someone to care for, someone to give to or tune into, try to help in one way or another. And so I got to thinking about what is a child and how do we relate? And a little 1 minute challenge came to me in this regard, which is that we're sort of biologically and spiritually and energetically wired to love our children, from the birth of a child. Now, not that Nirmal and I have this personal experience, at least in this lifetime. At other lifetimes, I'm sure we've had children. It seems to go with the territory of being human and having lived other lifetimes as a human being. It's how the species have propagated, after all. But we see this instinctive love, this biological bonding that happens with a child. And it's immediate, it's powerful, it grows with the years. When you read about or know of someone who has lost a child, it's like there's no worse trauma, in a sense, than burying your own child who died tragically or whatever. I mean, just by virtue of the fact that they passed away, it's tragic. It's by definition, it's tragic. So obviously there is this deep, profound connection. So the title of this video, "How is your child?" or how are your children, would be another way to say it, but comes from a deeper question, because you can't answer "how are your children" to the internet. I mean, this isn't the internet asking you "how are your children." This is to ask ourselves, spend 1 minute, ask yourself, if you could look at God as your own child. And this is something that's kind of culturally understood in India, that when a child comes into your life, that child is an image of God. If it's a little boy, it's Krishna. If it's a little girl, it's some form of the Divine Mother coming to live with us, coming to be with us in that little tiny form. And that's natural. That's in India, in the cultural world of India, that's a natural expression of how things work. And so we feel this profound devotion to that little child, to nurture it, love, support, etc. How often do we think of God in the same way? And so the 1 minute challenge, and this is a pretty profound 1 minute challenge, is to think of God as your own child and try to, for at least a minute, unbroken minute. This could be more challenging than you might think. express your love to that child completely, just for that minute. And then, of course, try to eventually be doing it 24/7, even when you're sleeping. But think of how, so, you ask a fellow parent, how are your kids doing? Oh, maybe you haven't seen them for a while. And, oh, yeah, so, Johnny's growing up and getting into baseball or whatever. I mean, parents get into their parental thing. What if your connection with God? I mean, think of a child and the complete vulnerability of a child. This infant is born into our lives, completely dependent on us for nourishment, for love, for shelter, for warmth. All of life. I mean, yes, the child has this, has biology working, but comes in absolutely dependent. And what if we thought of God as being absolutely dependent on our love relative to us? Not that God is dependent on anything in a sense. I mean, God is everything. But for our own sake, just as responsible as the most responsible parent has ever been in the history of the world at loving and nurturing and supporting and raising their child, what if we were that responsible to love God and to nurture that relationship just as we would an infant child, and then a small child, and then an adolescent child, and then a more grown-up child, but or a young adult, and then a full adult. But think of our relationship with God as the nurturing of love that we feel for a child, with that same profound devotional attention, such that when we wake up in the middle of the night, how is your child? I mean, just as a mom or a dad would wake up if they hear something, that little cry or that little something isn't quite right, and you're awake, immediately you're attentive. What if we could love God like that? I think this life would be profoundly different. So I'll just conclude by asking you, how is your child?